Hey everybody, hope you're doing well today. We're going to talk about something I think that's pretty amazing and a huge problem around the world and throughout the U.S. But we're going to talk about this connection. We're going to talk about this connection between irritable bowel syndrome, SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and Hashimoto's. How these things are connected. We're going to talk about these two problems because we have some new testing available to identify SIBO and IBS, and it's really important because everything that we've had up until this point has been there have been a lot of possibilities to get false negatives and false positives. And this is a really important thing. I'm going to talk to you guys about how irritable bowels and SIBO, like what promotes those, what causes those, and then how those problems can lead to autoimmunity and create a lot of issues for us. So accurately determining if you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and irritable bowel syndrome is really important, especially if you're autoimmune, because this may be one of the perpetuating factors driving the autoimmune process. Okay, so it's really important. So we're getting ready to talk about it in just a second. I know there's a lot on here, but don't worry. I'm going to simplify it for you guys. It's not extremely complicated. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. But please, guys, post your questions and comments for me. Let me know what you're thinking so that I can get back to you or my staff. We can respond to you within the next few days or so. Probably be, today being Friday, probably Monday or Tuesday before we can respond to some of these comments. But we'll do the best that we can. Also, guys, if you like this information that I'm talking about, what I always do with my live streams is please share the video if you like this type of content. If you share the video, then that's a way you're voting that you like this. If there are not any shares on the video, no worries. I'm just going to move on to different topics, okay? But this way, that's a way you kind of vote, like, yes, please more stuff like this, and I'll keep trying to teach you guys things that are related to similar topics, okay? So this really, guys, this particular topic relates to so many things and can affect your quality of life in so many different ways. So, like, for example, if someone has irritable bowel or SIBO, we know that affects quality of life in a major way. And if you don't know, if you don't have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or if you don't know, and I'm going to talk to you about what it means, these types of problems are very commonly associated with, bowel discomfort. And it can be, irritable bowel syndrome can be diagnosed as IBS with diarrhea, IBS with constipation, and it can come on several different ways. But so let's talk about IBS first. So IBS means irritable bowel syndrome. So the bowels are irritated. It typically comes on after an infection, and we know that there are certain infections in particular, like Shigella is one, but there's different types of bacteria that can infect the gut that will create this problem. And this is guys, these are functional bowel problems. Okay, meaning it's a functional thing. If you do a scope, you don't see anything, right? So there's like a colonoscopy doesn't necessarily show a particular, it's not an anatomical problem, it's a problem with function. And that's not always visible that's not usually visible at all with a scope unless you see irritation of some sort. But then you don't really know. These are definitely functional problems. So that's why when you go to your gastroenterologist, if you're having these problems, that if they do a scope to look for pathological processes, which is very important to have done, then they may not see anything, and they might say, well, you have IBS. Well, okay, what promotes IBS? And so here it is really, you typically see it after an infection, and it might not be completely obvious that you have or have had an infection that could promote this, but typically you see it after infection. The bacteria, what they do is a few different things, but one of the most common things they do is they release these CDTs, okay, which are, now it's a mouthful, but just know it's a toxin, okay, cytolethal, okay, cytolethal distending toxins, okay? Cytolethal distending toxins. And these toxins, what we know that how they contribute is that they break down the intestinal barrier. So they basically, through several different processes, they destroy and can affect the function and health of the cells that line your intestinal wall. Okay, so the lining of the intestines. These things affect it, they break down that barrier. And then what they do is they allow, once that barrier is broken, they allow toxins that are in the digestive tract to pass through your lining, your GI tract lining, into the bloodstream. And then you have toxins in the blood, okay? And I'm simplifying a lot of this, but that's okay. I mean, this is generally how it works. That promotes systemic inflammation, because when these toxins get into the blood, it promotes an immune response. That immune response we measure by looking at different types of antibodies. Okay, we look at IgA, IgG, and IgM antibodies. If you guys don't understand that, that's okay. Just know we can measure an immune response to these different types of toxins. It's really important when we talk about testing. Now, what this does is it promotes systemic inflammation, systemic meaning full body, throughout the bloodstream. And what that does is that leads to extra-intestinal, so outside of the intestines, other places in the body, autoimmune reactivity. And this occurs because these toxins in the blood, if, let's say, for example, that these toxins in the blood, this process breaks down this barrier, letting toxins into the blood. It can be bacterial toxins, like these like cytoskeletal proteins, which are something we can measure, like antibodies. That's actually part of you and part of these bacteria as well, and those can promote an immune response. And also bacterial cytotoxins, which are these things, we can look for immune responses against them as well. Now, if you've seen my other video on that I've done probably a month and a half ago on intestinal permeability or leaky gut, this has some similar themes to it, but we're looking at different things with the leaky gut. And in the leaky gut testing I was talking about, we looked at lipopolysaccharides, which are also released from toxins, and they're highly inflammatory. We know there's a lot of research that's been done on those. But these different components here that we can actually test, we know that they promote systemic inflammation throughout the body. And we also know that also sets the stage for like leaky gut, like intestinal permeability, where partially digested food proteins, bacteria can leak through into the bloodstream, triggering an immune response. And we know that the leading theory on how autoimmunity develops is really that there's this leaky gut. There are things or proteins or triggers. We'll just call them triggers. I mean, I can be really specific and say words like antigen and haptens and all these other things. But I'm trying to keep this so that it's more simplified. But these things leak through from the digestive tract, which could be partially digested food proteins. They could be pathogens and like bacteria, for example, into the bloodstream, triggering an immune response. If those partially digested food proteins or those parts of the bacteria, if they have similar protein structures as your tissues, like your thyroid, it could initiate through a process called molecular mimicry, guys, where they just basically look so similar. The bacteria, let's say, that's in the gut, that gets in the bloodstream, looks so similar in structure to the thyroid tissue, for example, that the immune system attacks both of them at the same time, thinking they're the same thing. That's called cross-reactivity. And that occurs because of the similarities, okay? So if this sets the stage for autoimmune reactivity outside of the GI tract itself, so with other tissues. So this is how this could be connected, that leaky gut because of irritable bowel or SIBO may promote autoimmunity to the thyroid, for example, like Hashimoto's. And we're learning so much more about this stuff, and the literature is really exploding, with research that's going on in these areas, because we're so interested. How can we dampen? How can we try to stop these autoimmune processes? Because we know that they're not curable, but if we can dampen them, we can make huge differences. Because right now, what are the only tools, guys? The only tools that people really have from a medication perspective are going to be anti-inflammatories and steroids and immunosuppressants, which is really a very, it's a very aggressive thing. And the other thing is it's not really addressing the cause of the immune response, right? So people want to be healthy, and doctors want to help you figure out what's promoting these problems. And these are some of the ways I think that in the future we're going to see, great strides made to help people identify what drives the process. And that's what we're trying to do, and that's what I do in practice. That's what I try to do now, is help people with the research and the information we have identify what drives and promotes autoimmunity. And fortunately, due to some fantastic testing that's becoming available, we're able to do that now better than we ever have. And we understand a lot of these things a lot better than ever before. So, okay, so that's kind of IBS. Now, the thing is that SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, now SIBO feeds into the same process. Now, SIBO is actually, guys, where in your small intestine you have bacterial overgrowth. And that bacteria is actually bacteria that's very commonly found in the large intestine, okay? So it's basically translocation or movement of bacteria from the large intestine into the small intestine, where it overgrows on certain types of fibers and sugars, right? So commonly you may have heard of, if you've struggled with this, or if you've, some of you are going to be more familiar with these concepts than others, and that's okay if you don't. It's not a big deal. This is, everything that I teach, I try to teach you guys as if you'd never been exposed to any of these things, right? But if you've seen with like SIBO, so if someone suffered with SIBO, maybe you've heard of like low FODMAP diets, right? Like FODMAPS. And FODMAPs, it's just an acronym for a lot of different types of sugars and fibers that are known to feed bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine, which you often have to, if this is identified, you have to remove FODMAPs as much as possible to starve the bacteria. Use either an antibiotic or herbal supplementation to help kill these bacteria, and then you need to repopulate the gut with good bacteria, okay? So there's a balancing act, but small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is just a movement of bacteria from the large intestine to the small intestine, and I say that here, excessive gut bacteria from the colon, okay? Now, what does that do? It leads to cytolethal distending toxins being released from bacteria. That breaks down the gut wall, leads to break down the intestinal barrier, lets toxins into the bloodstream, triggers systemic inflammation through an immune response. The immune response can lead to extra-intestinal, so outside of the intestines, other areas of the body. Let's use thyroid, for example. Autoimmune reactivity, promoting that autoimmunity. So if this is kind of the process, guys, so what are you going to do, right? You need to figure out, first of all, if this is occurring. So we have testing as of this month. See, before we would only have these breath tests available, which you would drink a solution and you would wait for the bacteria in the gut to produce gases. Then you would exhale into a bag and capture it, and then they would look at the results from the bag, the contents of the bag, and basically they would use that to try to determine if you had this bacterial overgrowth. And this is used for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, for H. pylori in a lot of cases. And the thing is that like with SIBO, it is like, there's a lot of debate right now on whether or not there's lots of false negatives, lots of false positives. So it's not, I rarely do that testing anymore because, I've just been diagnosing it or working with people to help them address it as a, through exclusion. So if it's not this, then it's this, right? And so now, as of March, this month, of 2017, we now have blood testing, there's such a need for it. We now have blood testing that will look for, again, these things we've talked about earlier, these bacterial toxins released, by the bacteria, and then also cytoskeletal proteins, which can come from the bacteria, but also your own intestinal lining, and we can be much more specific and understand if this process is occurring. Okay, so this could all promote breakdown of the barriers and autoimmunity. So if we can test and determine if this is happening, then we can say, okay, we've got this breakdown occurring. And then what I would do in most cases is probably get like a stool panel to look at pathogens, or what potential or what bacteria are there, what can we utilize to help kill the bacteria, and I'd probably also look at a pathogen screen, which is also a blood test that looks at antibodies to different pathogens. That's one of the ways. Sometimes this testing may come back if, depending on what's positive or negative here, you may want to look for autoimmunity against the gut, because it may not be bacteria, but this could still lead you in the direction of, we might want to look at other, autoimmunity like celiac or other types of problems that can be occurring to the gut wall, promoting breakdown in the barriers, toxins in the blood, systemic inflammation, and then autoimmunity outside of the GI tract. And guys, the thing is, this is not easy to figure out. I mean, it hasn't been. This is going to really help us. The new tests and things that we have available are going to help us to be a lot more specific and figure out what to do. Because before this, listen guys, 70% of people, right, 70% of people with IBS had immune dysregulation, low-grade inflammation, GI permeability. They had mood disorders, fatigue, fibromyalgia, and migraines. This was actually a research paper where that came from. And it makes it really hard to figure out, what is happening. So this allows us to have more concrete information to help us make decisions, which is always what we want to do if possible. But this is how, irritable bowels and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth may contribute to just a breakdown in the immune system barriers, which are extremely important, that could promote autoimmunity. Right? So, guys, this is really important. So many people, millions and millions of people, suffer with irritable bowels, with SIBO, which is really common with bloating, abdominal bloating. It's huge. I see it in the people that I do distance consulting with, and that I try to help. It is a huge problem. You see it. I see these symptoms all the time. If I had to say the most common symptoms that I'll see in people that have autoimmunity are going to be, you're going to see, let's say thyroid autoimmunity. Okay, so someone has Hashimoto's, for example. The most common things that I see are fatigue, brain fog, low energy, but then there's almost always digestive dysfunction, almost always constipation or diarrhea, bloating, a sense of fullness after they eat. And there's a lot of things that really need to be investigated to try to help and figure out why is that occurring. Because if that's occurring, guys, you've got to address what's causing that. In a lot of cases, if you want to improve the gut, the barrier systems that are breaking down, letting these things into the bloodstream, promoting the autoimmunity. So we've got to really try to think what kind of, how do we investigate root drivers of the process? And so I was really excited about this when I found out this was available just like 2 or 3 days ago, to share this with you guys, because I think it's really important you kind of understand these connections between the gut and autoimmunity, but especially between these two things, irritable bowel syndrome and SIBO, and things like Hashimoto's or any autoimmune condition. It's really important, and the more specific and the more concrete information that we can get, the more specific of a plan that we can come up with to try and help you improve your health. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. Listen, if you've liked this, please do share it with other people. Help us help other people. Help us help other people become their advocates, become empowered to help themselves. Help us help other people to be better partners with their healthcare providers, because there's so much well, I want to say adversity, but such an adversarial kind of relationship between, whenever I talk to people and they are going to, let's say, go to their general practitioner's office or their specialist's office, there's such an adversarial type of there's fear, and there's this adversarial nature, and people are kind of mad at their doctors. Guys, don't be mad. Don't be mad at your doctors, because a lot of this is all stuff that I'm learning postgraduate, after going through school. This is not anything that you learn classically, and you've got to understand too that a lot of this testing and the things that we do, they're completely outside of the insurance-based model. It's not there yet. The insurance-based model has not adopted these things yet. This is brand new, and a lot of the research hasn't even made it into textbooks yet to be taught. So there's a big disconnect, and your doctors are just trying to protect you. Just know that. When they say, they're criticizing things, and though it may seem, though you might believe completely everything that we talk about, and believe in me, for example, or the doctors that you're following or you're listening to, your doctors are just trying to protect you. So I'm not saying that it's, they might be more tactful in their criticism or their critique of what you're doing, and they're just trying to help. But at the same time, just know that you need to try to learn that your doctors may not be exposed to this. They're just trying to protect you. If you go in and you're like, hey, I want to get all these tests done and everything, you got to understand that their hands are tied so many ways. Not just in the fact that they're not familiar with it and they might be trying to protect you, but also by the fact that insurance-based guidelines are really based on how you present to their office. They have a limited number of ways and things that they're expected to order, right? So you can't just come in and say, hey, order every test that I want you to order, because they can't do that, because your insurance company has a standard of testing, which they call best practices, that the doctor's expected to follow and the doctor's expected to enforce, not your insurance company. So the reality is when you go in and you're like, hey, get all these tests done, they can't do that, because that will be a violation of their contract if they do that. And they may want to help you, but they may not even understand how to interpret the information you're asking them to order. And not that they're not intelligent enough to do that, that's just not what they do day in and day out. So you're putting a lot of pressure on someone as if they're withholding information. So don't do that. They're not, believe me, there's so much stress related to healthcare and trying to help people, because there's a lot more factors than just figuring this out. There's all kinds of other things that make us us. We're complex. We have all kinds of emotional stresses and social stresses and other things going on other than just determining if the person has IBS and SIBO. And we're complex. There's a lot of other things that contribute to us not being well. And you go into your doctor and you throw all this stuff on them. They don't. There's so many factors that are really affecting them. I know there's ways to have better tact. Okay, I'm not saying that being like really disrespectful to you is the most appropriate thing, but just realize your doctors are trying to protect you. If you go asking for a lot of tests, they may not even understand how to interpret them. Your insurance limits what they can order. The insurance company may pay for it, but the insurance company always reviews what's ordered, guys. And they don't review it initially when it's being ordered. They review it later. It's called an audit. They come in and they look at your doctor's records, and if those records don't support what your doctor ordered for you because they were trying to help you, then your doctor can be accused of fraud and a lot of other things. And I know a lot of you don't realize that, and believe me, it's just the truth. And the insurance companies aren't trying to not help you, but what they're trying to do is limit, testing that they don't, based on their guidelines, think is necessary, and that's wasteful, right? So no one's trying to hurt you. No one's trying to. It's just where our healthcare is today, guys, and I think it's going to come along. But listen, the whole purpose of what I'm trying to do is to help you guys be better educated, understand a lot of the possibilities, be better advocates for yourself, be better partners with your doctors, become empowered, right? There's a lot of complexity to this stuff. I wish it was so much easier. We could just say, look, let's just get all the testing we need to do, and it would be like that, no problem. But unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. Insurances don't even cover half of this stuff, but that's why you have to be your own advocate. You have to decide how you're going to spend, your resources and utilize your resources to try and help yourself. And I'm just trying to help teach you guys. Now, guys, if you have other questions about this kind of stuff, please post comments, share this, help us help other people. If you want to know more, guys, we've probably got 200 videos, 300 videos that I've done over a period of a year or two that you can go and start learning more about some of these concepts that I'm teaching, and really become your own advocate. You can go to drbradshuk.com and learn more. That's our website. That's also our blog. There's tons of videos there. You can visit our YouTube channel. You can visit our Facebook page. If you go to the office of Dr. Brad Shook, there's under our videos, there's tons and tons and tons of videos. And you can just search by keywords. There's lots of resources available to you guys. If you need help and you're stuck, maybe you would be a candidate for distance consulting. Now I work with people around the country and around the world, just doing consulting with them, helping them investigate their health, helping them try to figure out what is, what they should do next. And we can help people get testing. Sometimes we can help you really sort through this. Now, if you're curious about that, you need to go to drbradshuk.com and look at our application for care page. That page really describes the type of relationship we have, which is not a doctor-patient relationship. It's a relationship where, you know, I'm working with you on a consulting capacity, and we can do a lot of the things that we would normally do, but it does, because you're not in office, you're not here in my office, it does limit some of our things, because you need to have a primary care physician. We need to have a team approach. I don't work with people individually. You have to have a primary care doctor. If you have a specialist, great. Let's work together as a team and do the best that we can for you. But just be patient, do the best you can, keep learning, and let us know if we can help in any way possible. I'll definitely do everything I can to help you guys. But I really appreciate you. I hope that this has helped enlighten you guys more on gut health and help you better understand small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, IBS, and some of the ways that it can contribute to and promote autoimmune processes. But I appreciate you guys so much. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you for joining me. I will try to do another video, probably not until Monday, but I'll tell you guys, my next topic is really a good one, and it's going to be on leaky brain. So you guys have heard of leaky gut, right? You've all heard of leaky gut. We've talked about leaky. This is really talking a lot about intestinal permeability. The lay term is leaky gut. But we're going to talk about leaky brain. And we're going to talk about looking at proteins that make up the blood-brain barrier and how we can test to see if they're compromised. That's going to be the next live stream that I do. But I appreciate you guys a lot. I hope this helps you out. Please let us know if we can help you. You know, I'll talk to you guys again soon. So I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thanks.